Hello everyone and welcome back to the Skilling Open. We are continuing with the match Hikaru Nakamura versus Maxime Vachier Lagrave. And as you know, MVL won their first match yesterday and now, the day before yesterday, and now Nakamura has to win to get back into the match and then force a blitz playoff. So it was a really crazy day yesterday and they played so many interesting games. I couldn't decide which one to show you. So I'm just going to briefly show you positions from game 1 and game 3, and then we're going to go to the game that I'm actually going to show. So this is the first game where Nakamura had the white pieces, and this is the basically final position. Here Nakamura played bishop to d3, and Maxime Vachier Lagrave resigned as, there is nothing more to be done here. The rook is trapped. You can easily trap the rook. You can just push the past h pawn to victory, and black doesn't really have a good move or any move for that matter to continue this game. So here Maxime Vachier Lagrave resigned the game, and also I would like to show you this position. This is from the second game of the Rapids, where Nakamura also had the white pieces. The other two games of the Rapids where MVL had the white pieces ended in a draw. So this is the position I wanted to show you. A lot of moves are possible here. Rook to c1 was played by Hikaru, and here MVL played the d5. Sorry about that. He attacked the knight on e4, and now Nakamura has to decide what to do with the knight, to go to g5, to go to c5, or whatnot. And also, the b6 pawn is kind of hanging, so you have to also keep that in mind. But Nakamura played rook to c7, and he sacrificed the exchange here. So now you cannot capture the pawn because just queen captures on f7 with check, followed by queen h7 checkmate. So MVL accepted the rook, and now we have queen to d8 with check, king to g7, and now b captures on c7. And it was again in this position that MVL resigned the game. Whatever you do, pawn to c8 is queen on the next move, and there's nothing you can do about this. So Nakamura easily won their second match, and now he was able to force the playoffs. So in the playoffs we have 2 blitz games, 5+3, and then if that also ends in a draw, then we go into Armageddon. So this is game 2 of the blitz that we're going to show here. Game 1 was won by MVL, so it's a complete roller coaster. First, Nakamura wins 2 games of the Rapids, he gets back into the match, and then MVL wins the first game of the blitz. So now he only needs a draw from this one to clinch the match and go into the semifinals, but anything can still happen. So Nakamura needs a win here, and let's see what happens. He has the white pieces, and Nakamura opens with d4. So in the previous 2 games with the white pieces, Nakamura played e4, and he won against Maxime's Najdorf, which is it doesn't get any better than that. Maxime is the absolute best player of the Najdorf Sicilian in the world, and Nakamura just crushed in both games. Was really wild. So here Nakamura needs a win. He needs something different. He probably thinks that Maxime can also that he knows a lot more variations that can a bit more. It's going to be a bit more easier to force a draw with the knight. So he goes for d4 as he really needs a win here. Knight f6 and bishop to g5. He goes for the Trompovsky attack. We have d5 and e3 now. We have c5 challenging the center, and c3. The bishop is out of the cage, and now a very solid setup by Nakamura. And queen to b6, putting pressure on the b2 pawn. Here, queen to b3 is a very common move, just offering a queen trade, but Nakamura needs a win, and he's not interested in trading queen. So he plays queen to c1, guards the b2 pawn that way, and now bishop to f5. So what do we have here? Knight to d2 by Nakamura and knight b to d7. So just both players continue developing. Knight g to f3 and now e6, preparing to develop the dark square bishop as well. Knight to h4, attacking the bishop here. And here there is one move in the database that was played 20 years ago where bishop to g6 was played. But here we have bishop to e4, and it is as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. So let's see what happens. Nakamura continues with a4, and we have a6. We have bishop to e2, just continuing development, and now h6, saying you have to capture my knight here, because if you go back just g5 and I win one of your pieces. So after h6, Nakamura has to trade, bishop captures, knight captures, and now knight captures on e4. We have d captures on e4, and here again there is some danger that the g5 will trap the knight, and also you're not the f3 square is covered, so g3, making room for the knight on g2. Bishop to e7 by MVL, and now Nakamura finally castles. We have castles by MVL and queen to c2. We have rook 8 to c8, and both players now mobilize their rooks. Rook f to d1, rook f to d8, and rook 8 to c1. And we can say that now both sides have finished development of their heavy pieces, and now probably Nakamura will try and shift the knight back into the game with moves like this. So captures here, you cannot capture with the c-pawn as the queen would be hanging, so e captures on d4, and now knight to d5. An excellent square for the knight, and you don't really care about any c4 ideas because you can never capture as long as the queen is on c2. So knight to g2, Nakamura starts bringing the knight back into the game, and now f5, strengthening the position here, somewhat weakening the e6 pawn, but the white pieces are nowhere near the e6 pawn. And here Nakamura goes queen back to b1. He wants to start pushing on the queen side, but also maybe you can use this diagonal in some of your tactics. We have bishop to g5 now. Maxime attacks the rook on c1 and rook to c2. For those of you who are maybe new to chess, as a lot of people are new to chess nowadays, if you block the bishop with f4, there's always e captures on f3 en passant, and if you're a beginner, it's easy to miss stuff like that. So here, rook to c2. Just getting the rook out of harm's way, and now comes queen to b3, seemingly attacking the a4 pawn, so Nakamura defends it, but that wasn't the actual threat after queen to b3 was played. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the strongest continuation for MVL while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on winning the exchange, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to b4. And now you can see the problem, the rook is under attack, you cannot move it anywhere because the bishop controls this diagonal, and of course if you capture, just rook captures, and that's it. There's not much you can do here. You're gonna stop gobbling up the entire queen side, and there's no move you can play here. If you move the bishop, let's say bishop to f1, you can capture here. Again, just pick up everything. Everything is falling, and it's just a completely winning position for black. So after knight b4, Nakamura was like, how could I have missed this? This is I really need a win to get back into the into the match. So he gave up the exchange, rook back to c1, and MVL grabs it. Bishop captures, rook captures, and now knight back to d5. And here, Nakamura has a problem. He's just down the exchange, and it's not going to be an easy game for him. But he will try. There's not much more you can do. So f3, he starts by attacking the e4 pawn, and MVL trades this as it is a double pawn. So captures, and now queen back to b5, going after the a5 pawn. But now what we said that the e6 pawn was a little bit weak. With this trade here, Nakamura was able to make a target of it. So rook to e1, attacking the e6 pawn, which is an important pawn, defending a lot of things here. Rook to e8, defending, and now queen to a2, with some tactics, maybe possible in the future, but for the moment guarding the a5 pawn. We have king to h8, getting the king out of this diagonal, and now bishop to h5. And here you can see that it's not going to be all that easy. King to h8 maybe wasn't the most precise move, because now Nakamura is planning knight to h4 to g6. So the rook is under attack, MVL moves it, and now knight to h4, threatening knight to g6 to win the rook on e7. So king to h7, not allowing any such checks, but now knight to g6. Also a possibility here was bishop to g6. That can win material, and I don't think Nakamura missed this. I think he just didn't calculate if it would be enough to play for a win after all is said and done, because after king h8 you can capture on f5, and then after e captures on f5 the point is knight to g6 check is available again because the king moved, and then after king moves, captures, and now we have this position where Nakamura would be up a pawn, and his position is a bit more active, but would it be enough for a win? It's hard to say. And of course for a blitz game, you don't have all that much time to calculate everything. So he keeps the tension on the board, knight to g6, now puts pressure on the rook, and rook e to c7. We have knight to e5 now by Nakamura. Also rook captures on e6 is possible. None of the commentators knew why Nakamura didn't go for the pawn. But okay, he tried knight to e5 first, and now king back to g8, not allowing any checks, knight back to g6, and king to h7. As it's a blitz game, both players are low on time. Maxime Vachier Lagrave would be very happy with a repetition of moves and a draw here, but he repeats one move too much, because going back with the queen, you need to guard this pawn. This is what you have to do. He continued just repeating moves, king to h7. Maybe he thought Nakamura was interested in a draw, although that doesn't really make any sense. And then Nakamura finally grabs the e6 pawn, and now everything becomes weak. This is weak, this is weak, everything is just weak. So here, probably why MVL allowed it is this knight to f6 move, which seems like it attacks the bishop. After the bishop moves, you can pick up the knight. The problem is bishop moves with tempo. Bishop to e2 now attacks the queen, and the knight will be saved. So queen d5 now, offering a trade of queens, and of course now Nakamura very happily accepts the queen trade. Knight captures, and now bishop to d3. As the knight is now protected, you're also threatening to pick up the f5 pawn. So rook to f7 defending, and now, well, you could play g4 and just bust open that diagonal this way. We have knight to e5 first by Nakamura. We have rook f back to f8, and now rook to d6, challenging the knight here. Knight e3, and now rook to d7, going after the b7 pawn. So now Nakamura knows that he's much better here, and he will try and play really fast to outplay MVL. MVL is still up the exchange, but the knight and bishop are just too active. So rook to b8, defending, and now rook back to d6. We have rook b to c8, and now Nakamura tries attacking the b pawn from the b file. Rook to c7, defending now from the 7th rank, and king f2. Now Nakamura starts bringing the king into the game. Knight e5, we have rook to d6. Again, pushing the knight back. Knight e7, and now knight to d7 with some tricks on the board. If, for example, Maxime tries to win the knight, then knight f6 check will pick up the rook on d8. So, of course, MVL doesn't fall for that. Rook to f7, and now knight to c5. We have knight to c6, and now b4, defending the a5 pawn that Maxime was hoping to grab. We have g6 now, defending the pawn here, and now h4. And although you could play h5 here to prevent white from advancing the h-pawn, then you might create sort of a permanent outpost on g5 for white's knight. So MVL continues with knight e7, and now bishop to c4. First challenging the rook, rook to g7, and now bishop back to b3. If you want to move this knight, you have to move this bishop first. So bishop back to b3, and now rook to c6, offering a trade here. Nakamura declines, he goes rook to d7, and now knight to c8. MVL really wants to trade down, and here finally Nakamura does it. Captures, and now as the b7 pawn is under attack, Nakamura just attacks the rook one more time, because if you capture right away, then you also lose the c3 pawn, and you allow MVL to get back into the game. So here, bishop to d5, attacking the rook. And now, unfortunately, you have to move the rook away from the c file. You can't just keep it here forever. You have to move it. But whatever you play, your position will just fall apart. This will fall. This will probably fall. And it's going to be very difficult to defend this. Most likely impossible. But it's a blitz game, so anything could have happened. However, rook to c7 was played here. And now I don't even have to ask you to pause the video, because you know what Nakamura played here. It's very obvious. So since everyone found it, I'm just going to show it to you. Knight to e6 check was played, and it was in this position that Hikaru Nakamura, or rather Maxime Vachier Lagrave, resigned the game, and a great victory for Hikaru Nakamura that gets him back into the match. So here he equalized, then they played one more game. They played an Armageddon game where Nakamura chose the black pieces, and he was able to hold off Maxime to a draw, which means that Nakamura is the winner. But it was such a crazy day yesterday, and I thought, wow, which game am I going to show? I better show you just, little bits of, all of them, not all of them, but some of them. So I hope you enjoy that as well. Here you resign, because after the king moves, you just pick up the rook, and now it's completely winning. No point in even trying to, play for some tricks here. So yeah, after knight to e6 check, MVL resigned, and Nakamura, proceeds to win the Armageddon game as well. Well, not win. He won the match by drawing the Armageddon game with black, because if you're black in Armageddon and the game ends in a draw, then it's a victory for you. Chess is weird like that. So yeah, once again, I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Patrick Caps, Suhil Subramanian, Kurt Wendla, Piero Thibault, and Patrick Andrianoni for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the Skilling Open, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.